Foreign is dangerous. China's censors are banning Hollywood films from their domestic market in China. This means if you're a Hollywood studio and you're selling your movies into China, not so fast, not so much anymore. This article is coming from Zero Hedge. I'm Adam Post. I'm publisher of more than 1,000 independent comics. Let's get into the article. Before we do, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications. Just like American political leaders and financial giants, Hollywood has also misjudged China's intentions. Whoops. After Dalian Wanda's takeover of the American production company Legendary Entertainment, some warned that Beijing was trying to subvert Americans' audience's opinion of China by injecting subtle Chinese propaganda into American films. And we've all seen that in films. We've seen like the influence of China and their market and what they're trying to message in American films. But as it turns out, Beijing and President Xi had no intentions of embracing Hollywood. Instead, it appears they're trying to keep Chinese consumers from absorbing Hollywood's decadent cultural values. Interesting. Which is why American films have been increasingly blocked from being shown in the Chinese entertainment market in recent years. According to a recent report by Nikkei, while Hollywood studios hoped China would be a major growth market for blockbuster films, which is why Hollywood bent over backwards, and the entire entertainment industry and a tremendous amount of American business and American finance bent over backwards to please China. China's censors are now have been extremely selective about which films they allowed to be screened in the world's second largest economy, whose box office revenues surpassed America's in 2020, thanks in major part to the pandemic, because a lot of China was open during the pandemic. They had their shutdowns, but they opened up more quickly than the U.S. did. So China's box office was huge and actually surpassed America's. And another thing you should know about China is, even though American companies have had the opportunity to invest a tremendous amount of U.S. dollars in China, including in movies, just because you do hundreds of millions of dollars in business in China as an American film studio, it doesn't mean you can take that Chinese currency and then convert it to U.S. dollars and bring that back to the United States. It's actually very difficult to get money out of China once you've made money in China. That's a whole other conversation, but keep in mind, it ain't as easy to do business there as it would seem that it would be to do business here as it is for foreign companies. And the reason is because China has what's called a closed capital account, and they really want, when money flows into China, for it to stay in China. Kind of like Las Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Comment below if what you really think happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I want to know what your take is. Also, if you knew about the China's closed capital account. Just like NBA players who need to watch what they say, but they don't always do that, about sensitive issues like Hong Kong, Hollywood actors need to be careful about touching a nerve. When John Cena accidentally referred to Taiwan as a country, which China does not like that kind of talk, in a promotional clip for Fast and Furious 9, he nearly cost the studio more than $200 million. It ended with him begging for the CCP's forgiveness for his honest mistake. If you remember that, it was pretty terrible. Although unpredictable, China has been a major factor in decision-making for American studios. Isn't that strange? Because it's not like China always approved every movie. Film productions sometimes tweak scenes to get access to China. A trailer for the sequel to the 1986 blockbuster Top Gun suggested that Japanese and Taiwan flags on the leather jacket of the main character, Maverick, Tom Cruise, had been removed to avoid touching a nerve with Chinese regulators. Yeah, just make them mad. They will say, no, you can't have the movie here. In June, Fast and Furious 9 star John Cena apologized to Chinese fans for referring to Taiwan as a country. In a promotional video for the movie, Fast and Furious 9 made nearly $204 million in China and $173 million in the U.S. I mean, it's a lot of money, but as I was saying, it's not so easy to get the money out once you put the money in, and then you have to find other ways to invest it in China. It's really crazy. Sometimes anticipating how the Chinese audience will react to a film can be difficult. Take Shang-Chi, which was widely praised for its all-Asian cast. The movie was widely criticized in China, despite taking in hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide. Why? Studio and stars often find themselves drawn into controversy on Chinese social media. With a nearly all Asian cast, Shang-Chi was well reviewed, widely appreciated, and lucrative. Its U.S. box office had topped $200 million and brought in $388 million worldwide as of October 5th, according to Box Office Mojo. But as it was being promoted overseas, China's netizens, people that live on the net, and they're in China, criticized the stars, Simu Lee and, oh, come on, Ok Wafina, okay, for failing to conform to traditional Chinese beauty standards. And also the villain, the Mandarin, for being a stereotype. Oh, the Mandarin's cool. What's the problem? Some reviewers in the U.S. had similar criticisms of the Mandarin, a heavily reworked version of the Marvel comic strips Fu Manchu. Okay, that is bad. But Chinese actor Tony Leung received particularly heavy criticism on Chinese social media for the role before the film was released. Well, honestly, if you're going to try and be big in China, why didn't they think that through? Why are these people at Marvel being paid millions of dollars? It's one thing to make movies like Captain Marvel, but it's another thing to make social faux pas when you're trying to promote in the Chinese market, though they really shouldn't be thinking about the Chinese market whatsoever, no matter how big it is, because look, now they're blocking stuff. And while Marvel movies have been hugely popular in China, some fear the upcoming Eternals movie will be blocked by Chinese censors. The Eternals is not getting a Chinese release, it looks like. So, some suspect the upcoming Eternals faces difficulty securing a release date because of its director, Oscar-winning China. Why would you pick it? If you're trying to market the thing to China, why do you pick? They shouldn't be trying to be so focused on China anyway. But why would you pick, Oscar-winning director, that's great, and he's a China native, or she is. Chloe Zhao was criticized for making an unflattering comment about her homeland during an interview several years ago. China doesn't like that stuff. The announcement of her Oscar victory was blocked on the Chinese internet as well. Well, that is something that should be a clue that, oops, we have a problem here. It remains unclear if the Chinese moviegoers will be able to watch Eternals this year. Quote, if I was an investor, I would be very concerned about the strategy at this point that depends on access to the Chinese market and the good graces of Chinese film regulators. Yeah, you can't. There's no depending on them. There's no depending on the Chinese market. So to make very expensive films in anticipation of being able to deliver them to the Chinese market and not being certain that's possible is actually a much more financially irresponsible strategy from her perspective. And Cocos, well, she's right. She's right, obviously. You can't depend on China, so you can't budget and produce a movie to be sold in China if you're a U.S. film company. China's censors only allow a quota of 34 foreign films to be released in mainland China each year, despite years of negotiations between regulators in Hollywood and Chinese censors. Beijing has refused to change the quota. Beijing also has caps on foreign content on the country's streaming services. China has incredibly tight control of what's released. They have offices that did another video of this actually a couple of years ago, talking about how they have cultural offices that are extremely, extremely strict. And now, with current leadership, they're even more strict than they've ever been before about allowing in foreign content. What's more, by Beijing's recent crackdown on its own entertainment industry, banning depictions of sissy men, for example, while erasing one of the country's most popular actresses from the Chinese internet, further supports the fact that Beijing has a very clear idea of what entertainment should be permitted and what should not. Yet, China is having more and more tight controls over its entire culture, over its industry. They're cracking down on tech firms. They're cracking down even on private education and tutoring firms. So it's its own entity. You can't expect to do business in China ever. If they allow you in, they allow you in. We're lucky they'd sell us anything at this point, although they do need US dollars really, really badly. You look at all the criticisms of the so-called sissy boys, the closing down of the K-pop fan clubs, closing down of tutoring services that taught English. English is not included in school final exams. It's the atmosphere right now that foreign is dangerous, and Hollywood is subject to that as well. Yeah, Hollywood is very subject to that, said Stanley Roseland, a political science professor who specializes in Chinese politics and Society at the University of Southern California. And while Hollywood has so far depended on China for growth, Beijing doesn't need Hollywood for anything. Already, homemade patriotic blockbusters have proven to be major hits in China and abroad. For the past 6 years, domestic films have led the Chinese box office in revenue. Well, now that they've imported in enough U.S. films and they've made investments in U.S. film companies like Legendary, but other investments as well, and in direct investments in production budgets for international films, they know enough about the industry that no, they don't need the U.S. Film market anymore. But if Hollywood still needs China, it's an open question whether China needs Hollywood. No, they do not. In the first half of 2021, China's box office reached roughly $3.9 billion, according to the tracking app Decadent. And although the highest grossing films used to be Hollywood blockbusters, domestic films have taken the crown for the past 6 years. Of course, Chinese films are not necessarily going to compete equally with U.S. blockbusters because there's also going to be limitations on how blockbusters would be promoted in China. They control their market like down to the last grain of sand. Quote, "Hi, Mom," a heartwarming, end quote, heartwarming Chinese movie about a woman going back in time in an attempt to change her mother's life for the better, has the highest box office of 2021 worldwide so far at $822 million. Patriotic Chinese blockbusters have generated much revenue as well. The Battle at Lake Changjin raked in $203 million over the National Day weekend in China, and it's now been a huge box office hit in China. So American studios have a difficult choice to make. They can start being more sensitive to the demands of the Chinese market, which is impossible because they keep changing standards. But such a craven approach would likely elicit a backlash at home as politicians accuse Hollywood of putting profits over human rights. And also, China they want to own it and can control it. So why should they give access to U.S. films? Dune was released recently and did well in China. It's considered to be a good opening. So I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Should we be focusing our movies on what the Chinese censors might want? Or should we actually adopt an approach where we make movies, comics, other entertainment that people actually like, instead of trying to please censors? I think that would probably be a good idea. But tell me what you think in the comments below. Also, you could check out College of the Dead. This is still shipping. I have some copies left. Shipping immediately, where college costs you an arm and a leg. Also, The Mermaids has shipped successfully, and we've gotten some great feedback on it. We still have some copies available as well, shipping immediately. I am working on new projects, but I don't have anything ready yet to announce. So again, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications. I will see you again soon with another video, and if I don't see you, I will miss you.